So how do we forgive ourselves? Find out on this episode of IncreMental Health Tips. Welcome to IncreMental Health Tips. My name is Jared, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Liz. Today we're going to be talking about forgiving ourselves. As we're all aware, sometimes we have reason to forgive ourselves, but other times maybe we don't recognize that we need to. And so there's a lot to unpack there. But I think the place to start is to ask you, Liz, why? Why is forgiveness important? What is the benefit of forgiveness? Like if we hold some sort of grudge or animosity against ourselves for some reason, knowingly or unknowingly, why does that matter?
Well, I think a lot of people can be unaware of how much a resentment or grudge can actually be impacting them, even after whatever transpired to cause that resentment has passed. So it can cause physical problems like stomach aches, headaches. It can make you feel sick in your body because of the emotional stress that it's causing you.
Well, in my undergraduate degree, I took my undergraduate degree is in health, partially. And one of the things we actually talked about is in the same way that you have physiological issues, there's an emotional component of that. And so sometimes dealing with the emotional component can actually help the physiological component. Or sometimes stress can actually manifest into some very real heart conditions and things like that. So forgiveness alleviates these problems and can improve physiological symptoms. Anything else?
Well, I think actually understanding what forgiveness is also important, because a lot of people think, oh, you forgive and you forget. And that's not necessarily what forgiveness means. It doesn't mean that you just ignore problems. Like if someone's an addict, that doesn't mean that you're going to welcome them back into your home to continue to behave in that same way. But it does mean you're trying to let go of that anger and animosity that you feel towards the person.
Well, and so it can actually help your relationships, and that's what I was ultimately driving at with that question is even forgiving yourself. There's something about how we regard ourselves that can really translate into our relationships with others and our interactions with others. And so being able to release ourselves from that can actually help other people see difference in us, and that can really help a lot of relationship dynamics.
Yeah, and a lot of times we can be much harder on ourselves for our failings than anyone else is. And so recognizing when we're being hard on ourselves, or maybe, we've really blown some big things and we know we've done things we shouldn't have done, and so we're feeling bad about it. Recognizing those things and taking the steps you can to move beyond that, to do some personal development and overcome those things that you don't like about yourself, and forgive yourself for not being perfect. I think those things really can make a big difference for a person.
Well, and also understanding that if we have some shortcoming, that it's really an opportunity for development. The first step of any sort of development is to understand what it is you're doing. And so if you don't see yourself as having any deficiencies, you're not going to grow, because you can't focus priority on any particular area. That's not to say you're always going to focus on the area of deficiency, but understanding that can be really helpful and really give you a good place to start with personal development.
Well, if you think about professional athletes, they're very good at what they do, but they will look at small little pieces and think, how can I make that better? And that's part of their personal development. So if you're beating yourself up over times when you've failed, then that's going to stop you from looking at the opportunities that you still have to grow and develop and to improve yourself in some way.
So we've discussed what forgiveness is and the benefits of it, but how do we know? I sort of feel there isn't a lot of middle ground on this, where those listening and you and I might have times that we know that we harbor unforgiveness of ourselves in some area, but other times maybe we do need to forgive ourselves and don't realize it. So how do we realize that we need to forgive ourselves? How do we get to that moment of epiphany?
I think if you notice that you're very often critical or angry with yourself, like, how come I'm not able to do this? I think recognizing those things that you say to yourself is a really good starting point for developing your awareness if there may be an area that needs forgiveness. I've worked with clients where, they have a mental health condition and they have held a grudge against themselves. They've been angry with themselves for being unable to do things that they want to do. And as they begin to work through things, they've been able to let that go and come to terms with their inability to do everything that they want to do.
Would things like should statements also come into play here, where I should do this, I should be that, I should have done this?
Yeah, should statements, they can definitely be a big part of that, where someone feels that they should do something either because they want to be able to do it or because it's what's socially expected. And so that belief that because something should be done, that they have to do it, and if they don't do it, then they're a failure. Those are very common themes that come up in therapy.
Well, so all of that to say, we've now, all of that to say, as we're discussing this, is a therapist can obviously help tease out some of these issues and recognize some of the signals and some of the indications that somebody might need to forgive themselves. Is there any other, but other than going to a therapist, is there any other practical recommendations you have for those listening, as to maybe take some time to consider, because you never know. Like, so is there anything that people can do while at home?
Yeah, there's a do-it-yourself workbook that I've used with clients to help them take those first initial steps in being able to forgive themselves. And the workbook is targeted towards just general forgiveness, but I've found it also works very well with clients who are struggling to forgive themselves. And so we're going to link that down in the description. And it's by Worthington, and he is a therapist, and he's done a lot of great work on forgiveness and how to do it. And it covers the beginning steps are really a lot of the things we've already talked about becoming more aware of the level of forgiveness you have, becoming more aware of how your unforgiveness is impacting you. How is it impacting your body? How does it impact your other relationships? And also making the distinction between a decision to forgive and emotional forgiveness. So often you don't feel forgiving towards someone until after you make a decision to forgive them.
Well, right, it's all in process. I mean, oftentimes that can be true of relationships too, where every relationship has ups and downs, but there's a certain part of that where you have to make some decisions to approach things in certain ways or do certain things. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to not improve that relationship. So, very important considerations. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but if you like our content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, remember that small steps can lead to big changes. We'll see you next time.